Last month, Harold walked into my clinic. 74 years old, retired high school principal. The kind of man who stood at a podium for 30 years and commanded a room. But last month he couldn't stand up from my waiting room chair without gripping both armrests and rocking forward 3 times. His daughter had driven him to the appointment. She was the one who told me he'd stopped walking his dog. He looked at me and said, "Doctor, my mind still works fine. I still want to go places. But my legs have given up on me." I ran his labs. Nothing catastrophic. His protein intake? 2 eggs every morning, just like his doctor told him in 1985. And right there in that sentence was the entire problem. Now I want to be very careful here because I know what some of you are thinking. Dr. David, what's wrong with eggs? Eggs are good food. I'm not here to tell you eggs are bad. But here's what the 2 eggs for breakfast advice missed. And it missed it completely. The average man over 60 needs roughly 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight every single day, just to maintain the muscle he has. For a 180-pound man, that's about 98 grams of protein. 2 eggs give you 12 grams. 12. That leaves an 86-gram gap that your body has to fill by breaking down its own muscle tissue every single day. This is called sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss. And by the time you feel it in your legs, you've already lost 15 to 20% of your quadriceps mass. You don't notice it until you can't get off the toilet by yourself. Now, here's where the sardine comes in. And I know what you're thinking. Sardines? The little fish in the tin can that your grandfather ate on saltines? Yes, that exact fish. And here's why this matters for your legs. 1 can of sardines, a standard 3.75-ounce tin, contains 23 grams of complete protein. That's nearly double what 2 eggs give you. But here's the part that matters even more. Sardines contain all 9 essential amino acids in ratios that are nearly identical to human muscle tissue. When you eat a sardine, your body doesn't have to do much work to turn it into your quadriceps. The amino acid profile is already matched to human muscle. Eggs are good, but sardines are biologically more efficient at building human leg muscle, gram for gram. A 2021 study out of the University of Tokyo, published in the Journal of Nutritional Science and Vitaminology, followed 112 adults over 65 for 12 weeks. The group that ate oily fish with bones, specifically sardines and mackerel, 4 times a week, gained 31% more leg extension strength than the group eating equivalent protein from eggs and poultry. 31% more strength, same total protein, different source. The researchers attributed the difference to 2 things: the specific amino acid profile of fish muscle protein and the vitamin D content of oily fish, which I'll get to in a moment, because vitamin D and muscle function are more connected than most doctors realize. But before I explain the vitamin D connection, I need to address something. Some of you are going to say, "Dr. David, I take whey protein. Isn't that enough?" It's a fair question. Whey protein is fast digesting. It spikes amino acids in your bloodstream for about 2 to 3 hours. Then it's gone. Sardine protein is different. It's what researchers call a slow-release matrix protein. The oil, the connective tissue, the small amount of cartilage, these slow down digestion so that amino acids trickle into your bloodstream over 6 to 8 hours. For a man over 60 fighting sarcopenia, that slow release matters enormously. A 2023 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, Maastricht University, 144 participants, compared fast-digesting whey protein to whole food fish protein consumed before bed. The fish protein group showed 27% higher overnight muscle protein synthesis, 27%. While you're sleeping, the sardine is still working. The whey protein finished its job by 10 p.m. Now let me take you deeper into the science of why this specific fish matters for your legs. The quadriceps, the hamstrings, the glutes. Because this is not bodybuilding science, this is independence science. This is can I get off the toilet by myself science. The quadriceps, the big muscle on the front of your thigh, is the first muscle group to atrophy in aging men. There's a reason for this. The quads are composed predominantly of type 2 fast-twitch muscle fibers. These are the fibers that produce explosive power, standing up from a chair, climbing stairs, catching yourself when you trip. Type 2 fibers are exquisitely sensitive to a signaling pathway called mTOR, the mammalian target of rapamycin. When mTOR is activated, your muscle cells receive the instruction, build. When mTOR is silent, the instruction is break down. Here's what the research tells us about activating mTOR in aging muscle. Leucine, one specific amino acid, is the primary trigger for mTOR, and you need a threshold dose of leucine in a single meal to flip that switch. For a man over 60, that threshold is approximately 2.7 grams of leucine per meal. 2 eggs give you about 1.1 grams of leucine. Below threshold. Your mTOR switch stays off, even though you ate protein. 1 can of sardines gives you 2.8 grams of leucine. Above threshold. Switch flipped. Muscle synthesis activated. This is called the leucine trigger hypothesis, and it was confirmed in a 2022 randomized controlled trial at McMaster University, published in the journal Nutrients. Men over 65 who consume meals containing at least 2.7 grams of leucine maintained quadriceps cross-sectional area over 16 weeks. The group eating the same total protein but spread across low leucine meals continued to lose quadriceps mass. Same protein, different leucine distribution, different legs. Now let's talk about the sardine skeleton, because this is the part no one talks about. Sardines are one of the few protein sources you eat, bones and all. Every tin of sardines contains approximately 350 milligrams of calcium, most of it from those tiny, soft vertebrae you barely notice. Calcium is not just for bones. Calcium is the mineral that allows your muscle fibers to contract. Every time you take a step, every time you stand up, calcium ions flood into your muscle cells and trigger the actin-myosin cross-bridging that generates force. If your calcium stores are low, and many men over 60 have suboptimal calcium because they've been told to avoid dairy, your muscles literally cannot contract with full force. It's not a strength problem, it's an electrical problem. The calcium isn't there to complete the circuit. Sardines solve this in 1 can. 350 milligrams of highly bioavailable calcium, with the vitamin D to absorb it. Which brings me to vitamin D. 1 can of sardines provides approximately 40 to 50% of your daily vitamin D requirement, specifically vitamin D3, the active form. A 2023 meta-analysis published in the Journal of Cachexia, Sarcopenia, and Muscle, combining data from 8 randomized controlled trials with 2,300 participants over 60, found that vitamin D supplementation combined with adequate protein intake improved lower extremity muscle strength by 22% compared to protein alone. The mechanism is direct. Vitamin D receptors are embedded in the membrane of your muscle cells. When vitamin D binds to those receptors, it increases the expression of contractile proteins, the actual machinery that makes your muscle fibers shorten and generate force. Without enough vitamin D, you can eat all the protein in the world, and your muscles won't translate it into strength. The sardine delivers the protein and the key that unlocks the muscle cell door to let that protein do its work. Now I want to talk about the omega-3 fatty acids in sardines, because this addresses something that's often overlooked in the muscle conversation: inflammation. After age 60, men enter a state that researchers call inflammaging, a chronic, low-grade systemic inflammation that quietly breaks down muscle tissue. Your body is essentially in a constant low-level state of repair. Cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin-6 circulate at elevated levels and directly stimulate muscle protein breakdown through the ubiquitin proteasome pathway. This is not a theory. It's measurable in a blood test. 1 can of sardines contains approximately 1.8 grams of long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. A 2022 study from the University of Southampton, published in the journal Clinical Nutrition, studied 300 men and women over 65. Those with the highest blood levels of omega-3s lost 40% less quadriceps muscle mass over 4 years, compared to those with the lowest levels. 40% less muscle loss. The researchers concluded that omega-3s don't just reduce inflammation, they directly sensitize muscle tissue to the anabolic effects of amino acids. In plain English, omega-3s make every gram of protein you eat work harder at building muscle. The sardine contains the protein and the omega-3s that amplify that protein's effect. It's a self-potentiating package. Here quotes the practical application. I'm going to give you a weekly plan, not a diet, just a structure. Monday, 1 can of sardines on a piece of rye toast with sliced tomato. That's breakfast. 23 grams of protein, 350 milligrams of calcium, 1.8 grams of omega-3s. Wednesday, 1 can of sardines mashed with half an avocado and lemon juice, eaten with cucumber slices. Friday, 1 can of sardines warmed gently in a pan with garlic and olive oil, served over sautéed spinach. This is not complicated. This is not expensive. A can of sardines costs between $1.50 and $2.50 at any grocery store in America. That is cheaper than 2 organic eggs in most cities. 3 meals a week, less than $8 total, and you have covered your leucine threshold for muscle synthesis on each of those days, plus your calcium for muscle contraction, plus your vitamin D for receptor activation, plus your omega-3s for inflammation control. Now I know there are concerns about sodium. 1 can of sardines packed in water contains about 300 milligrams of sodium. Sardines packed in oil, about 350. If you buy the no salt added versions, it drops to about 100. This is not a sodium concern for most people. By comparison, 1 slice of bread has about 150 milligrams. 1 tablespoon of soy sauce has 900. The sardine is not your sodium problem. But if you have been specifically told by your doctor to restrict sodium, choose the no salt added variety and you're still getting all the protein, calcium, vitamin D, and omega-3s. There quotes. One more mechanism here, and it's the most overlooked. Sardines are extremely high in coenzyme Q10, CoQ10. A 3.75-ounce can provides approximately 3.5 milligrams. Now, CoQ10 is not a muscle-building compound directly, but it is the rate-limiting factor in your mitochondrial electron transport chain. In plain English, CoQ10 determines how efficiently your muscle cells convert food into ATP, the energy currency that powers every muscle contraction. After age 60, endogenous CoQ10 production drops significantly. Muscle biopsies from older adults consistently show lower mitochondrial CoQ10 concentrations. When your mitochondria can't produce ATP efficiently, your muscles fatigue faster, recover slower, and generate less force, even if you have adequate protein. A 2021 randomized controlled trial from the University of Udine, Italy, published in the European Journal of Nutrition, gave 106 older adults either CoQ10 or placebo for 12 weeks, while both groups performed the same resistance exercise. The CoQ10 group improved leg extension power by 28% more than placebo. The sardine gives you the protein, the leucine trigger, the calcium, the vitamin D, the omega-3s, and the CoQ10 to actually use that protein for energy production in your leg muscles. This is what I mean when I say it's a self-potentiating package. Let me tell you how Harold did. He came back to see me 4 months later. He walked in without his daughter. He sat down in my waiting room chair, and when I called his name, he stood up. One smooth motion. No armrests, no rocking. He looked at me and said, "Doc, I'm walking my dog again, 2 miles every morning." His quadriceps circumference had increased by 1.4 centimeters on each leg, measured by ultrasound. His gait speed on the 4-meter walk test improved from 0.8 meters per second to 1.2 meters per second. 0.8 is the threshold where falls become likely. 1.2 is the threshold where independent community walking is safe. That change, from fall risk to safe mobility, was driven by 3 things: adequate leucine to trigger mTOR, adequate calcium and vitamin D to enable muscle contraction, and adequate omega-3s to quiet the chronic inflammation that was silently eating his quadriceps. The sardine delivered all 3 in 1 can for less than the price of a cup of coffee. This is not a miracle food. There are no miracle foods. But when you look at the biochemistry, the leucine threshold, the calcium contraction coupling, the vitamin D receptor activation, the omega-3 anti-inflammatory pathway, the CoQ10 mitochondrial support, you realize that this one humble fish, sitting in a tin can on a shelf for $2, is one of the most complete independence-preserving foods available to a man over 60. Your legs are what keep you standing. Your legs are what let you drive. Your legs are what let you pick up your grandchild. They deserve more than 12 grams of protein from 2 eggs every morning. They deserve the full biochemical support package that nature packaged into a sardine. I quote Dr. David, and this is Wellness After 60. If this video helped you, please make sure to subscribe for more upcoming videos. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you in the next one.